All right, so I want to thank everybody. I'm Laura Freeman. I'm the Director of Marketing at Federation, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. The way we're going to work this today is that Jason is going to deliver some opening remarks, and for members of the press, if you have specific questions, if you could just put into the chat that you have a question, and then I will call on you and unmute you. So, and then once the questions are really meant for the press, but if we have time at the end and some of our folks want to ask some questions, if Jason can keep his eyes open, we can address those also. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So good evening. My name is Jason Shames, S-H-A-M-E-S. I am the CEO and Executive Vice President of the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey, and I am coming to you live from Warsaw, Poland, where I arrived earlier today on a special mission from the Jewish Federations of North America, an umbrella organization representing over 150 local Jewish communities in North America. So the mission and purpose of the Federation is to witness and bear witness firsthand to what is going on the ground with regard to the refugees and needs as a result of the war in Ukraine and really Russia's invasion and the effects that it's had on the Jewish community as well as the community at large. The Jewish Federation itself has two main partners that work in this realm. One is the Jewish Agency for Israel, which is an organization that mostly focuses on Aliyah, or immigration to Israel, and then the immigration and absorption once they are in Israel, as well as Jewish Zionist education. The other partner we work with is the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which you can imagine works on the ground to maintain the social welfare and social structure of communities on the ground. In particular, our Jewish Federation has a relationship with a sister city of Lviv, and it has been this way since I arrived at Federation over 11 years ago. And we provide funding for the entire social welfare gap for that community, including hunger insecurity, elderly relief, and summer camp for children. And as you can imagine, we are deeply concerned about the horrific situation there as a result of the bombing that's now encroaching further and further west, unfortunately, towards the border. As a result of what has been happening, the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey immediately opened up a box to raise funds for supplies, medicine, clothes, blankets, diapers, and anything else that was needed. And to date, we've received or we're going to be sending over $600,000 worth of direct support. So a little bit of an emotional look at what today has been like for me. And I'll start with the personal, because people have somewhat heard me talk about this, but not collectively. My grandmother was born in a town about 80 kilometers from where I stand today and moved to Warsaw as a young child. And at the age of about 15, 16, witnessed firsthand the invasion from the Nazis. And in the middle of the night, begged her father to leave. He refused to, saying God would protect him. And out of a family of 12, my grandmother left on her own in the middle of the night and was the only one to survive. So coming to Poland, and in particular Warsaw, during a time like this is rather unique, because I'm struck by both what's going on now and the differences to what happened then, but also what we're witnessing in terms of the refugees at the same time. And while there's so many similarities between World War II and today, there are also so many things that make this remotely different. And as I mentioned to my family in a WhatsApp group chat today, is thank God we have Israel today, and thank God the American Jewish community is united in its support for Jewish refugees and refugees on the whole, as we take that care of those in need. So I am here, like I said, to bear witness firsthand to the horrific tragedies that are occurring. This afternoon, we spent a good 3+ hours in a refugee hotel. This is a hotel that the Jewish Agency has occupied for people in transit, mostly to make Aliyah from Israel. There are currently over 5,000 Ukrainian Jews who have moved to Israel with our support. And there's another 3,000 here now waiting to do so. It's estimated that at least 600 people show up every single day looking for support. And as you drive around the city, it's very self-evident that Poland in and of itself has been very welcoming to any refugee coming from Ukraine. There are tents that are posted all around and specifically very close to train stations and other ports of entry that are serving food, delivering medicine, and things like that. And we were able to drive by a train station where we saw people camping out and sleeping on the sides as well. So that seems to be the situation here. I'm gonna, rather than go on, I'd rather do this through Q&A. So I'm now willing to open up the floor to take any questions on exactly what I've seen and heard over the past 7 hours. So Laura.
Jason, right now, we don't have any questions in the chat, but why don't you talk a little bit more about what else you're going to be seeing for the next few days while you're in Poland, and even what you brought over. You know, we were very committed to making sure that not only are we bringing money and funding for which is most needed, but we've also brought over supplies and things like that.
So thanks to our Jewish Volunteer Center and other efforts by our community and by other communities that are on this trip as well, we brought over everything ranging from socks, hats, clothing, medicine, specifically medicine, diapers, and all sorts of material for the community here that is suffering from some of the basic items we take for granted. You know, one of the things we've gotten involved with in Federation that I'm particularly proud of is menstrual poverty. And you can imagine what it's like for a refugee coming here. So there's two particular stories that hit me today that I'll share. The first one was something I just heard from, and I want to make sure I get her title right, the Israeli ambassador to Poland, although I think it was the #2, spoke about how a 12-year-old girl, not Jewish, showed up at the Israeli embassy a couple of days ago, begging to be united with her mother who's living in Israel. So that might be a common story, even though they're not Jewish, except for the fact that the mother wound up in Israel through human trafficking and was found to be involved in prostitution through the human trafficking. The father has been abusive, and the Israeli government has taken this 12-year-old and is going to be reuniting her with her mother safely in the next day or two. The other story that struck me rather deeply today was a retired gentleman from the Kiev area who had actually retired with his wife over COVID to the suburbs in a town called Markakov. I can check the spelling on it later just to be specific. What he was sharing with us was that during the bombings of Kiev about a week ago, his house was hit and every single thing in the house was burnt, including all their paperwork, all their documentation, passports, life savings, and his wife was burnt. Not critically, but severely, thankfully it wasn't worse. It took him over 3 days of traveling by bus to get to the border to come to this hotel. And since then, the Israeli government, along with the Jewish agency, thanks to funds from our system, she's receiving medical care. The Israeli government and the Jewish agency are helping this family or these two get their paperwork in gear, and they're tomorrow, in fact, going to be making Aliyah to Israel. And that's the type of story we've been hearing consistently. The other thing that has struck me while I've been here, since I'm going to take liberty and not talk about a third one, is they're really calling this the refugees of women and children, because the men are not allowed to leave Ukraine. And there's an enormous amount of mothers with children or a mother with young children and their parents who are staying at this hotel waiting for the processing. And to be clear, not everybody who's staying in these hotels is going to be making Aliyah. They estimate that 30 to 40% will. They estimate that another 20% want to go back to Ukraine, and the remaining 40% or so are unsure what they're going to do with their lives. But everyone that we've met with has shared a similar story about having to abandon or be displaced from their home in a rush, a horrific journey just to get out of Ukraine, and now a sense of anxiety and concern. Israel's opened up a field hospital, which we're going to see on the border tomorrow, along with the Joint Distribution Committee and the work that they're doing with regard to direct social welfare. So that's sort of how we're going to work. We're about a couple of 100 miles from the border, but it's going to take us about 5 hours to get there tomorrow. And in order to do this in one day, we're actually going to be flying back. It's a one-way bus trip tomorrow. We've also heard from the Hillel, the Youth College Services, about the need to provide services to young adults who are coming, including mental health and trauma associated with having to leave with absolutely nothing. And we heard from the Chief Rabbi of Poland today talking about not only the preparations that were made with regard to Mishloach Manot and Purim, but now to talk about how they're going to host seders for thousands of people at a time in 4 to 6 different locations. And so what we're witnessing here is something that I've never seen before. I have been to Gaza. I have been up north in Israel when there's been war many times, but I've never until now witnessed a refugee calamity and a human crisis the way that seems to exist here in Poland at the moment. And it's a remarkable, if I could just go back to what I said about my grandmother being forced to leave, it's really remarkable how the difference now is that not only is there Jewish infrastructure to handle the Jewish and non-Jewish needs, but the fact that Jews and the Polish government are working hand in hand to make sure that everybody that crosses this border is at least given some dignity and some aspect of dignity in this crisis and situation.
Jason, a question came in just asking if you have a sense as to what cities and what region most of the refugees are coming from.
It's mixed. I mean, it's really from all over. We were with someone today who's from as far east as Kharkov, and we were with someone who came as far west as Lvov. So it's everywhere and anywhere. So the number that's being thrown out here is that there are 10 million displaced individuals so far in Ukraine from this crisis. 3 million have made it out of Ukraine and 2 million have made it to Poland, which is a pretty enormous number. If you think about Bergen County has about 950,000 people, you're talking about double that into Poland and then some.
Jason, can you talk a little bit about the unique role that Israel is playing in this conflict?
So I would advise everyone here to participate on the special Zoom we're having with, sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his name because I'm tired, to talk specifically about the Israeli role in this. But I will tell you, the Israeli government on the ground here is working hand in hand with the Jewish agency, the Polish authorities, and what remains of Ukrainian authorities to the extent back home, so that paperwork is in place for those who want to make Aliyah. Right? They've also provided, they're the only country, or at least they told us tonight, they were the only country that was putting a field hospital in Ukraine itself. And today we met with 2 doctors from the Balansin Medical Center in Israel who are actually providing healthcare and mental health services at the 4 hotels that I had mentioned earlier. And what they're finding is that there is much anxiety and trauma, mental trauma, as there is physical.
I know this is probably not an easy question to answer, but do you have a sense as to all of us sitting in the United States watching, what is the best thing that we should be doing right now?
Well, I think there's the advocacy component, although the United States seems to be strongly keen, no matter what the party, on ending the conflict here. I think it's Herb Kino. Thank you, Lee. We'll send out the notice on that because that'll be more of the inside Israeli government perspective. But I certainly think that here, any way we can get supplies over here, supplies are desperately needed. We're hearing that the number of refugees is overwhelming the supply and demand chain here. And quite frankly, money. You know, Lee and I heard from a orphanage the other day, a Jewish orphanage called Tikva in Odessa that's had to relocate 390 kids to Romania. That's a $32,000 a night expense. So while it seems, you know, sometimes like we're always asking for money, the clear answer here is that money helps feed people, money helps put a roof over people's head, and money helps people rebuild. Now, the main concern here as well that we heard that the Polish government is feeling is that there's no end in sight to this conflict. And that's a very dangerous, sort of dynamic for everyone involved because of the human suffering, the humanitarian cases that it will create, and of course, the expense of it all. As I talk about it, I'm reminded that the Berlin doctors told us that the rate of COVID, even amongst refugees, is rather high. So there's a lot of heightened anxiety around that as well. It's a very, very difficult situation. I say the Jewish community on the ground here in 3 weeks has done remarkable work. The Polish government has done what it possibly could. They were overwhelmed by this and not expecting this run of refugees, and they're not saying no to anybody, or at least that's what we're hearing. And the calamity is far greater and I think far more intense here than you could imagine, even being at home watching CNN, Fox, or whatever it is you watch or read.
Have you gotten a sense, the question came in, Jason, that there is interest on any of the refugees coming to the United States? And do you know if there's an infrastructure for them if they do?
So we haven't gotten that far yet. It came up with one person saying that the United States was going to be asked to start taking in some of these refugees, but we've been mostly focused on the work of the Jewish Agency today, which is about Aliyah and Klita to Israel, and tomorrow will be mostly the JDC.
And Jason, can you share with everybody a little bit more about the who makes up this group that you're traveling with?
So this is a group from JFNA, which is the umbrella organization. Unfortunately, the lay leader I was going to travel with was not able to make it for a very personal reason I'm not going to get into. So I'm here with people from other communities. Atlanta's here, Philadelphia is here. There's one person from St. Louis, Hartford has one person. So it's that type of group. There's only about 20 of us plus the JFNA staff that are here. And it's, look, it's a difficult task to get everyone in and to get everyone through the COVID procedures and to get everyone signed off on being here. There is a limitation on what's available here. Buses, translators, and all of that are being used in the field with the refugees.
All right, so before we sign off, because I know you're absolutely exhausted, maybe just give us an idea as to what else is on your itinerary for the next 2 or 3 days. And if any other final questions come in, we'll address them, and then we're going to say Lila Tov to you.
Thanks. So tomorrow, like I said, the wake-up calls are coming in at 4:30 in the morning. We're going to be heading out to Lublin tomorrow, specifically to the Am Yisrael Lublin Yeshiva building, which has been turned over from a yeshiva dormitory into a refugee hospital. And we're going to see the Jewish people sheltering there and hear from the JDC team. Then we're going to head out to the Medika border area. And then we're going to spread out in different vehicles because it'll give us a greater opportunity to go in and see the other transit points in camp. Right now, they're trying to keep, I believe, the transit points into Poland from 6 different places. So that's one of them. And then we're going to meet with the professionals on the ground who are working in all of these different camps and the transit points to hear more about what the humanitarian needs are. And then we're going to move between these border crossing points to see refugees who are freshly crossing the border. And I just want to make a note about that because it's not quite what I would have imagined a couple of days ago. So refugees are coming in. It's planes, trains, buses, and automobiles, and even on foot. So people are really literally leaving every single thing they have in their home and trying to find any mechanism possible to get here. We heard a story today about somebody who took 48 hours on a bus with 3 little kids just to get to Warsaw today. And so I think people are desperate, and it screams as to what the situation is like in the ground just a couple 100 miles from here.
Okay, thank you very much. This press conference has been recorded. If anybody needs a copy of the recording, if any members of the press need any additional information or want some additional access to Jason, we will try to provide that. And Jason and I are obviously in constant contact. And if we feel like we want to do another press conference to update everybody on the rest of his trip, we will do that and we will let you know. So thank you very much to everyone for coming. Jason, thank you very much. Have a good night's sleep and we'll be in touch tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Stay
take
safe.
Take care, Jason.
Bye.
Bye.
Well.